Life, Liberty, and Levin, and I'm Mark Levin, and we have two great guests. Jim Jordan, how are you, sir?
Doing fine, Mark. Good to be with you.
Chip Roy, good to see you.
Good to see you, Mark.
You don't need much of an introduction.
I don't know about that.
Well, in 2006, May, you won the Republican primary race for the 4th Congressional District of Ohio.
Yeah.
And you've won ever since. You have a 100% lifetime rating from the Ohio Taxpayers Association. You're one of the founders of the House Freedom Club.
Mm-hmm.
Chip Roy, I know you very, very well. You've been a longtime conservative activist in the state of Texas. You also were chief of staff to Ted Cruz for a period of time, and you're now a newly elected member of Congress from the 21st District of Texas.
Yes, sir.
Well, we had an important election, and people are messaging about this election. We picked up a few seats in the Senate. Mm-hmm. We lost 36 seats or so in the House of Representatives. I understood the president's message. He was all over the country campaigning. He was very, very focused on what he was campaigning about, the economy, immigration. I understood the Senate side, Kavanaugh, among some other important things. Here's the problem. I still don't know what the House of Representatives on the Republican side was running on. I still don't know what the message was. And I would have thought with the economy as it was going and the president out there, while it wasn't a blue wave by any means,
right.
Why did they take so many seats?
Yeah.
Jim Jordan.
Well, you're right. I don't think we matched, on the House side in our races, I don't think we matched the intensity that the president has displayed here in this town, taking on the establishment, taking on the swamp, taking on this town. And remember, everywhere the president went, he made a huge difference. You talk about Missouri, you talk about Indiana, you talk about Florida. We got a Freedom Caucus guy who's now the governor of the state of Florida, one of our largest states.
Ron DeSantis.
He came to Ohio on the Monday before. The projections were we might lose all statewide races. We won them all but one. And that's because the president came to Ohio. So the president, there was an intensity and energy about this guy that the American people appreciate. They saw that matched in the Senate when the Senate stood up and defended Kavanaugh, but they haven't seen it from the House. I mean, have we replaced Obamacare? Have we reformed welfare? Have we secured the border? Those were the three biggest promises we made the American people.
The leadership there would say, well, wait a minute, we sent that stuff to the Senate. Is that true?
Some of that went to the Senate, only the health care bill. We didn't do a welfare reform package yet, and we certainly haven't secured the border. We had a good bill, as you know, Mark, that we all supported as conservatives, that Chip was campaigning on the campaign trail, but we only got 193 votes because we couldn't get enough Republicans to do what we said we were going to do. So the message should have been in this campaign, we've accomplished what we told you we were going to do, more importantly, what you elected us to do in 2016. That should have been the message, but we couldn't say that because all we had really gotten done was the tax cuts. So this is going forward. We have to regain the trust of the American people and get accomplished those. Tell them, if you put us back in power, we're going to get those things done.
Chip Roy, what did you campaign on in your successful race?
So my message was pretty simple. I ran, as Congressman Jordan just alluded to, I ran on securing the border, I ran on healthcare freedom, and I ran on balancing the budget. And these are all things that Republicans have said they would do for a long time, but failed to do. And if you want to know what happened, you don't need to look any further than the fact that the Republicans literally failed to do what they said they would do over the last several years. I think that this is a clear symptom of leadership failing to do their job, to paint with bright colors, to use the language that Reagan used. We had the opportunity of a lifetime to actually gain in a midterm. The American people were hungry. I can tell you in my district, they're hungry for leadership. They are happy to see the president shaking things up in Washington, breaking the status quo, getting rid of 15 regulations for every one new regulation, getting us out of the Clean Power Plan, so-called, getting us out of the Paris Agreement, making sure we've got good judges. But I can tell you this, had it not been for the Democrats' blatant overreach in the Kavanaugh hearings, re-energizing our base, our base was demoralized and sitting back because the House leadership and the House Republicans weren't giving them a reason to support them. I don't literally even know what the message was from House Republicans on what they were trying to sell. I know what I sold, and it worked, and people listened.
But this is where they're going to be pushing out all these subpoenas. I believe in congressional oversight strongly. The FBI, the Department of Justice, the intelligence agencies, our tax money goes into these places. These are institutions that are authorized by Congress. They're funded by Congress. You have federal employees involved in activity. It's nothing to do with somebody's tax returns.
Right.
It's nothing to do with a private enterprise that's worth billions and billions of dollars, where members of Congress sit there and say, I'm going to pretend I'm an IRS agent, and I'm going to dig into this stuff, and I'm going to spew it out there, and I'm going to give it to my friends at CNN and MSNBC. I'm going to sabotage this administration. I'm going to drag it down. Former federal prosecutor. The Trump administration says, we're more than happy to work with you on matters of official conduct, on matters involving the administration. However, I have a blanket rule out there. Anything involving my family and me and our personal finances, you don't get anything. What about that argument?
Well, I think you're exactly right. And I think, I think about it through this lens that when we talk about separation of powers and what our job is in Congress to oversee the executive branch, and it's critically important that that be done, that's meant for, as you pointed out before, constitutional purposes. It's meant about the power of the executive branch being used and in its official duties and what it's trying to do and whether or not it's constitutional, whether or not they're following the law. That's the job of Congress. The job of Congress isn't to go down fishing expeditions for personal assaults or going after the president's family. That's not what it's about. It's about protecting the Constitution. And frankly, you want to make Article 1 great again, which is something I talk about on the campaign trail, Article 1 Congress. Then Congress needs to reassert itself in governance, in passing laws, in not turning over power to the bureaucracy and the executive branch. They need to do their job in representing the people. That's where I think that we're missing the boat.
In the end, it's about freedom. There's a big difference between the IRS targeting people for their political beliefs and going after those folks and holding them accountable, which we've tried to do. There's a big difference in the FBI doing what they did and us trying to hold them accountable than it is going after people's personal finances and what the left is now telling us they're going to try to do to the president and his family. That is, it's ultimately about freedom. And I would argue today, and I don't mean this to sound overly dramatic, but I think freedom's under attack. You are seeing it from all. We had a hearing, Mark, where we had college professors in. I asked this one college professor at the end of the hearing. I said, Professor, on a safe space or in a safe space on a college campus,
whatever that
could I say this sentence, Donald Trump is president? His response began with, well, Congressman, it depends. I interrupted him. I said, it's a fact. There's no it depends about it. He was elected on November 8, 2016. He was sworn in January 20, 2017. He lives at 1,600. He's the president of the greatest country ever. There's no it depends. But that's where the left's crazy thinking, when freedom is attacked, that's where it takes us. So this is fundamental. This is so fundamental. We should hold agencies accountable when they come in after your personal liberties, any American's personal liberties. But when Congress is going to use their power to go after the president just because they want to dig into his business finances, give me a break.
Well, they'll camouflage it. The very party that rejects so much that is in the Constitution in its original interpretation will now wave around the Constitution and say, the Emoluments Clause. You see, they now found a clause, not a pretend clause. They found a clause, the Emoluments Clause, and they'll say, this is why we need to determine if the President of the United States finances are appropriate, or Russia collusion to see if he got anything from Russia or anything like that. That's no basis for oversight. What they're trying to do there is lay a fake foundation for impeachment. The oversight function is a legislative function. They're trying to figure out, you all are trying to figure out appropriations. Maybe we need to rejigger an agency. Maybe we need to eliminate a program or something like that. Right. You don't get to look over the president's shoulder and look at his finances. Now, let me ask you this question. So if somebody's wealthy and they get elected president of the United States, will this now be the new pattern? If the Democrats can drag a wealthy Republican president through the dirt, now the Republicans, let's say this guy Bloomberg, God forbid, gets elected. You know what? You're 3-4 times wealthier, reportedly, than this president. We want your tax returns. We want to know, did you ever talk to your reporters? We want to know about all your businesses. And so is this going to be the new trend?
Well, I think there's no question that when they start opening Pandora's box, that's the direction that it goes. And then where does that stop? And where does it go with respect to, people who are working in the administration and Congress? But again, all of this stuff is taking all the eyes off the prize of what the American people actually want to see accomplished. And you're talking about freedom being under assault. It's under assault because Republicans are just laid down on the ground and they won't stand up to defend freedom. Whether we're talking about what we're talking about here with the misuse of government power to go after people in the administration or the president's family, or whether it's failing to actually articulate the cause of freedom and stand up on the issues that we believe in, of course the left is going to take advantage of that. We saw that with why so many Democrats ran as openly socialist and Democrat as in their agenda.
And by the way, most of them lost.
That's right. But they also got millions of votes, in part because some of our people didn't stand up and proudly trumpet freedom and the issues that we know we want to stand by.
Isn't this one of the reasons people, the conservative base, love Donald Trump?
Yes.
And as a matter of fact, during the Kavanaugh hearings, all of a sudden there's Lindsey Graham.
Yes.
Now, Lindsey Graham is really appreciated by conservatives and so many more people because he gave that, may I steal it, a Spartacus-type speech, right?
Yeah, sure enough. They want to see you fight for the things that count. That's what they want to see. And they want to see that particularly in light of the context we're in now. Think about today's left. Today's left says we're going to applaud Kaepernick when he disrespects the flag. We're going to embrace Governor Cuomo when he stands up and says America was never that great. And we're going to cheer on Maxine Waters when she says go out and harass anyone who supports the president. That's today's left. And our conservative, and I think most Americans with common sense say, we want someone to stand up and fight that. That's not who we are and what our country's, that's not why our nation's such a great nation. Fight that. And they see the president doing, they need to see more from Congress doing the same thing.
And that's why the left is emboldened to put out things like Medicare for all, right? They're going out there and saying, you know what I believe? I believe in healthcare freedom or healthcare for all, allowing people to be able to access the doctors of their choice, to have somebody who can come to your house. You can pay them $100 a month and have access to them, have their cell phone. You can have nurses. You can have insurance that you carry from one job to the next. These are all things that we can do if we'll stand up and fight for them to lower the cost of healthcare. And we go down that path for a while talking about it, but we turned over the field to the Democrats by saying that we're going to play on their field on pre-existing conditions and ceded ground on that.
One of the things Reagan used to do and Jack Kemp used to do, they used to say enterprise zones, tax cuts across the board. They used to talk about freedom. They used to be very positive.
Aspirational.
They used to embrace aspirational. They used to embrace our principles. And then the Democrats are stuck sounding like green-eyed shade bureaucrats.
Yeah. That's right. And when we instead cede the ground to the left and we say, as Republicans did in this election, we said, oh, well, we'll offer pre-existing condition coverage sort of because we need to, because you guys are talking about it, instead of proudly proclaiming what this country can provide in terms of low.
The President of the United States, through his chief of staff, tells the Attorney General he wants his resignation. The Attorney General is a very decent man, a good man, and by the way, may run again for his old seat. And I think he's an excellent senator. There may have been a mismatch in terms of the Department of Justice. And so they appoint his chief of staff, a former U.S. attorney, to be the acting attorney general. So first we have these so-called experts on TV saying, oh, that's not right. You got to follow succession. Well, of course, that's wrong. So he's the acting attorney general. Then we get the gaggle of leftists out there saying, it's a constitutional crisis unless the acting attorney general recuses himself from the investigation. The acting attorney general had nothing to do with anything. Why should he recuse himself?
He shouldn't.
And meanwhile, Rosenstein is there with all kinds of conflicts. Can you explain that to me?
You're right. Mr. Whitaker should not recuse himself. Mr. Rosenstein has a conflict he's had from the very beginning.
What is that?
He wrote the memo that became the basis for firing James Comey that the left says, oh, that's obstruction of justice. Mr. Rosenstein is now overseeing the special counsel whom he appointed, Robert Mueller, and Robert Mueller is looking into, was there obstruction of justice into the firing of James Comey? You've got to be kidding me. And we've pointed this out for, this is why—
he's a witness.
Of course. We've pointed this out from day one. But Mr. Rosenstein, no, it's all fine. The other problem with Rod Rosenstein is we've asked for the McCabe memos. Sorry, you're not going to see them. They've even been subpoenaed by Congress. We've asked to see parts of the FISA. Sorry, we're not going to show it, even though everyone in Congress has a clearance. We've asked to see the Bruce Orr 302s. We've asked to see Jim Baker, former—
Let me say, the 302s are the FBI interview notes.
Yeah, those are the notes when Bruce Orr, whose wife worked for the company, who hired Christopher Steele, who put together—
You know all this is going to come to an end.
Well, that's why we got a lot of work to do between now and the first of the year when the.
But my question is this: just as your former federal prosecutor, just as a constitutional, rational matter, Why would an acting attorney general have to recuse himself? Because the Democrats demand that he recuses himself.
No, well, the Democrats are the same people. I saw something yesterday where Elizabeth Warren is saying this is a constitutional crisis. You remember in June of 2017, it was a crisis because Jeff Sessions, was the attorney general. I mean, they can't get any of their stories straight, right? They're looking for a crisis where there isn't one, and unfortunately ignore the ones where there are problems. Yeah. And that's what we've seen time and time again. And frankly, it's partly, though, why I think the American people are so frustrated is seeing this continued pursuit, continued coming down a rabbit trail, and instead of focusing on the issues they care about. None of this is making anybody's lives better, taking care of their health care, taking care of food on their plates, making sure they've got jobs and food and shelter and clothing. All of this is D.C. being the swamp at its worst.
Here's one other thing, though, guys, about Rod Rosenstein. It's alleged that he said he was going to wear a wire and record the commander-in-chief of our great country. It's alleged that he was talking about the 25th Amendment, all in that critical time frame between March 9th, when his memo was the basis for firing James Comey, and March 17th of 2017, when he named Bob Mueller. This is all supposed to have happened in that time frame, and he won't answer our questions. That is wrong.
They talk about the Saturday Night Massacre. This is like I want the younger viewers now, like the Saturday Night Massacre. Now, in the Saturday Night Massacre, Richard, at least it's getting better. They've been comparing our president to Hitler. Now they're comparing him to Nixon. So, we're moving down the line here. So, but the Saturday Night Massacre, Nixon ordered his attorney general to fire the special counsel, Archibald Cox. He refused and resigned. Then he ordered the deputy attorney general. He refused and he resigned.
Right.
Next in line, he directed Robert Bork, the solicitor of the United States. He said, look, I don't agree with it, but somebody has to do it. He is the president. He is the executive branch, and he fired him. That's why they kept him off the Supreme Court, by the way. Has the President of the United States ordered anybody to fire Mr. Mueller?
He said just the opposite. He said just the opposite. Let him complete his investigation, because there's nothing there. And guess what? There's nothing there. There has been not one bit of evidence to show any type of coordination, collusion, conspiracy between the Trump campaign and Russia's influence the election. But we know the Clinton campaign, like I said before, hired the law firm, who hired Fusion, who hired Christopher Steele, a foreigner, who then went and did what? Talk to Russians to do what? Put together a fake dossier that was the basis. This is what just, I cannot believe this happened in our country, was the basis for the FBI going to a secret court to get a warrant so they could spy on the other campaign. And the Democrats say, oh, nothing there. What? Are you kidding me?
Chip Roy, what about the media's role here? The media clearly, they can't disguise it anymore. They've sided with one political party against the other. They obviously are very excited about what the Democrats are going to do. I mean, after the election, it was clear the Democrats were taking the House. Jake Tapper on CNN excitedly and repeatedly was talking about all the subpoenas that are going to fly, and maybe the I word, impeachment, will be brought up. And so they definitely have the media on their side. We saw this press conference the other day where CNN's representative, Jim Acosta, literally was trying to disrupt and sabotage the press conference. The purpose of a presidential press conference is for we, the people, to find out what's going on, not for people to become provocative and make news. So you guys, the Republicans in that, you're not going to have the press, most of the press on your side. But hasn't that always been the case?
Look, there's no question that there's been bias in media. When I grew up as a child in the Reagan era, and I remember watching all these press briefings, have Sam Donaldson sitting there sparring with Ronald Reagan and so forth. But I think there is a certain edge to today's media that is a little different even, and it's even worse. What we saw with Acosta, it's terrible, but Acosta is all about himself. The White House for him is a prop. Right? He's using that to leverage and promote himself. It's not about journalism and seeking the truth. He's making opinion news. He doesn't even need to be in the White House in order to do what he does, right? He can opine about it from the back benches somewhere. The reality is that they're using this for a show and to prop themselves up instead of honoring their responsibility in a free press and a democracy to seek the truth wherever it may go.
Well, that press conference on the media was an absolute disgrace. And they disgraced themselves in front, not just the country, but the entire world. And it is not their job to disrupt a press conference. They can ask tough questions, and also to push away. And he did push, but apparently not to the majority in the House. But it's still a big issue to the majority in the Senate. So I assume nothing will come out of the House of Representatives under the Democrats to secure the border.
No.
Because they believe that helps them electorally and every other way, and they actually want to change the nature of the electorate and the voter and turn some of these purple states blue and red states purple. Is there anything that can be done in the House or anything the Senate can do?
Well, we'll see. I would argue it's also a majority issue, too, for the majority of the country. It's a big issue. Look, I think it's tough because remember where they're at. Their leader of their party, Secretary Clinton, said she wants a borderless hemisphere. That many of their members have said they want to abolish ICE and never secure the border. It's tough to work with. I mean, Chip said it best earlier. One of the things that defines you as a nation is you have boundaries and borders. Part of being a sovereign nation is you should be able to control your border. The idea that one major party in our country doesn't want to do that, it's tough to work with them. So I guess we can if they see the light and actually want to have a border security wall, secure the border, have it happen in a legal way. But it's tough, and you think about every issue, from chain migration, asylum reform, sanctuary cities, the whole visa lottery, all those things, they're not with us there, so it's going to be tough. That's why elections are so important.
Let me make a suggestion to you on this. When Reagan was president, he never had the House of Representatives. He shut down the government 6 times on key issues that he wanted to take care of. The MX missile, the Trident missile, other things. And he got a lot of what he wanted. And he went over the head of the Democrats in the House, and he spoke to the American people directly. If the President of the United States wants to secure that border, and these spending bills come, massive spending, Mitch McConnell was very proud of himself the other day that they were getting all these appropriations bills, bigger spending than any time in American history. And the Republicans better watch this. Isn't it time to say, okay, now this is what I want, and this is what we're going to do, or we will shut down the government, and when we shut it down, we'll win more elections, because that is the pattern. The president takes charge, shuts it down, the American people see leadership, they want that border secured. Isn't that, in other words, we're not without power.
Absolutely. I mean, I was proud to be Senator Cruz's chief of staff in 2013 and work with Jim and a lot of great folks in the House to try to make sure that we stood up to defund Obamacare, because we knew it was going to cause premiums to go up, and they've doubled and tripled since. So I'm proud of what we tried to do there. And frankly, we would have succeeded if some folks hadn't run to the hills crying in the corner saying that shutting down the government is somehow, going to cost us elections, when in fact it doesn't. It caused us to gain seats then in 2014. It caused us to be able to win the presidency in 2016. Immigration is one of those issues that we need to turn back around on the Democrats. I'm tired of letting them take the high ground in their opinion that somehow they're pro-immigrant, when the worst thing they can do is, in the false name of compassion, in open borders, have women and children getting sold into the sex trafficking business, have women riding on the top of train cars, empowering the cartels because we refuse to do our basic job as a sovereign nation and secure our border. Well, we need to turn that back around on the Democrats. It is they who have blood on their hands with what is happening on the border to these children and these kids. And by the way, go down and spend a day on the border. Let's have hearings down in Laredo, Texas. Let's talk to the Border Patrol Union, who's down there, who endorsed me in my campaign, and I was proud of it. The 72 miles of the Laredo sector, how many miles of that do you think have not just a fence, but have even a road that's navigable along the Rio Grande? 2 miles. They can't see the river because the cane is too thick. They don't have cell signals. They don't have radio signals. They don't have operational control of the border. The cartels do, and it's because we refuse to do our job.
So
Let's stick that back around on the Democrats.
How do we fix it? And to me, the answer is take it to them.
Yeah. Remember, this Congress, the one time the government was shut down is when Chuck Schumer said amnesty was more important than funding our troops. And the American people 2 days later said, you're crazy. And he said, Shazam, I'm going to open the government back up. He got the message.
But then we didn't take advantage of it.
We blew our chance just a few weeks later on the big spending bill. We could have got the border security wall if we'd have been willing to engage in the debate. And after all, we got a guy in the White House who's pretty good at communicating with the American people. Pretty darn good at it. And if we engage the president, or the president engages and we're unified in doing this, we can win some of these things.
Yeah. Ladies and gentlemen, don't forget, almost every weeknight you can watch me. He just has to adjust the president on how he manages Congress. But he does have tools in his toolkit. We just talked about no bill is a law until he signs it. No appropriation is made until he agrees to it. Almost nothing happens. You guys in Congress, soon to be, you look up there at the White House, you look at a very, very powerful position. the White House looks back at Congress, they say, well, these are very, very powerful people. Here's the thing. Chuck Schumer's not the smartest guy in the world. This amnesty thing blew up in his face, and the Kavanaugh situation blew up in his face. The president helped us win seats. So did Chuck Schumer. But for Chuck Schumer and the radical left in the Senate, the whole Kavanaugh thing wouldn't have happened. Same with the House of Representatives. The radicals are now in charge of every single committee, L.A., San Francisco, Baltimore, Manhattan. You know, there's a big country in between, and they're going to be watching, too. These aren't the brightest light bulbs either. So there are governing opportunities for the minority in the House, and there's certainly governing opportunities for the president and the majority in the Senate. Here's my concern. Unless they're willing to institute these battles, I look at the Senate. Mitch McConnell's there. He always goes out, we're not going to shut down the government. Then he's taken the most powerful tool a president has away from him to control and direct spending when he has a House of Representatives that's hostile to him. How do you think this is going to play out?
Well, I think it is a mistake if Senate leadership takes those tools off the table. That's precisely what they did in 2013, which led us to have to back away from where we were in trying to defund Obamacare. Keep those tools on the table so that we can win the argument and force the question, call the question. Let's take these things to the American people and not be afraid to run on the things that and try to execute the things that we're running on. I think spending is a core issue that we can focus on right now. We failed to balance the budget and do our job when Republicans had control of the House. Now let's get busy doing our job and focus on balancing the budget. And we can do that and force the question if the president and the Senate Republicans will make us do that.
Yeah, no one wants a government shutdown. The only one who's done it this Congress is Chuck Schumer. But why is it when we're standing up doing what we were elected to do, what the American people sent the president here to do, what they sent Congress members here to do, why is that somehow shutting down the government? This is I don't want it. No one wants it. But I do want to do what we were sent here to do. I do want to do what they told us that we should do when they gave us the privilege to come serve. So let's have that debate. All too often, Chip's right, all too often what we do is we don't even engage in the debate. Let's have the debate. I think we can win because we got common sense and the truth on our side.
And isn't the evidence that doing the right thing is politically smart, too?
Absolutely. Every single time.
And I'll even go further, that doing conservative things are politically smart, too?
Yeah.
A lot of the Republicans who lost these House races were not conservatives. They ran away from their principles. They were trying to cut the baby in half. They were imitating sort of soft Democrats, if you will. And so the base may not have turned out. All this talk about females in the suburbs, I think a lot of these people who lost is because conservatives, they may have voted in the Senate, they may have voted for governors, but they said, oh, what the hell is the House doing?
Never hurts to do what you said. Never hurts to keep your promises. And when we do that, it's good politics. More importantly, it's good for the country.
Works every time.
We'll be right back.